Today we're going through Super Mercado Libre. I think some people call it Mercado Libre or Meli for short. So if you don't know what that Super Mercado is marketed and Libre is free. I do actually speak Spanish, by the way. Hablo español si quieres. Puedo usar español para toda presentación. Okay, so not investment advice, do your own research, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the first thing you need to understand about Latin America is their three main markets are Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. And if you go look at their quarterly earnings, like the vast majority of their revenue is these three markets. So right now, if you're Meli, these are the markets they're focusing on and they want to grow. Just a general note here, Latin America lags behind the United States like 5-10 years in certain areas, and internet access is one of those things. I remember being in Argentina in 2016, and like the Wi-Fi, a lot of the Wi-Fi I had was pretty sus, but if you went there today, it'd be much higher quality. In general, this is one of the most important things to understand about Latin America is their financial penetration is not nearly as good as the United States. So Brazil is actually very good at 83%. Argentina is pretty solid at 66%, but Mexico is at 50%. So, you have like half of Mexico, one of the biggest economies of the world, where they don't have bank accounts, they don't have credit cards, and they don't use debit cards, right? You can see right here, 25% of people in Mexico possess a debit card as of March 2021. This is one of the most recent statistics I found, but I promise you, as someone who goes to Mexico fairly frequently, this has not changed. So, we'll talk about their businesses in a second here, but their main businesses are e-commerce and fintech, and they're operating in these markets. So there's a massive opportunity to basically do very well in these markets. The other thing to note here is Argentina is not doing well right now. They have had massive inflation. They are getting it under control under the new president, but they're getting it under control by decreasing spending. When you decrease spending, you typically slow down the economy. So I'm not a macro guy in terms of like predicting stuff, but I will say if you're decreasing spending, you're cutting a lot of jobs, they're cutting a lot of subsidies. This is something that can lead to a recession. I'm sure Argentina is already in a recession. I don't know the level of recession they will face, but if this is, I think this is their third biggest market currently, but historically was probably, their biggest at one point and second biggest. It is a lot of money. So if they do really badly, it will affect their business. They have had a 36% increase in net revenue year over year to 4.3 billion in this previous quarter. And their income went up 76%. What I will say is they invest a lot of their money in their business. So I don't personally care that much about their income, to be honest. I want them to be profitable, but I do want them to take that money and keep putting it back in their business. Brazil was up 57% year over year. Mexico was up 60% year over year. That's insane growth, guys. Which if they keep this up, it means they will double, right? The size of the business in these two companies. And of course, a lot of times, like you don't double and then go to 0%. You kind of slowly decline. So I think the runway they have in Brazil and Mexico is absolutely just a fatty. Argentina's down, as we mentioned. It's not great macroeconomic. And then, just as I mentioned here, they're getting a lot more money users on their fintech platform, and their assets under management as well as their credit portfolios growing quite rapidly. And we will discuss those in a bit. One of the things I love about this company is their CEO is Marcos Galperin. So he went to Stanford, and he's the founder of Super Mercado Libre, and he's still the CEO today, which is a beautiful thing to say. And I think he's like late 60s, early 70s. So he is like mid 50s probably. Let's just look him up real quick. Marcos Galperin, 52. So in terms of CEO, like he's still got another 10-15 years at least if he wants to continue running the business. So you can go through this, but you can see a lot of great numbers here at the top of the article. So commerce, a lot of people call Meli the Amazon of Latin America, and basically it's very similar. You can match buyers and sellers on the marketplace. So again, we've seen a lot of great numbers here, but what's really beautiful about this business and what their massive mode is they don't just do this, but they also have a logistics network, and then they have their fintech arm. So if you're a business and you want to sell something, let's say you live in like Peru and you want to sell, I don't know, Peruvian necklaces. I don't care, right? You can go to Meli and they will help you with logistics, getting stuff from A to B. They'll help you with the money part of getting money from A to B. So you can basically set up your entire online store through Meli. And I really like to see this, by the way. The unique active buyers are up 16% year over year to 53.5 million users, which means they're still adding new users to the platform. So whenever you're growing commerce, you want to add new users, and then you want to get as much money out of each user as well. And when you do these things at scale, if you're making, for example, like Amazon probably does like $100 billion of revenue in a quarter, for example. I don't know what they do. If you can get a 1% increase, that's another $1 billion in revenue. And sometimes you can get a 1% increase by just like adding the smallest change, And it's just like, the cost for engineering will be like a $1 or $2 million, and your profit will be just straight up $1 billion. So the reason why like things like this matter at scale and just drilling deep is like when the more revenue you have, every percentage increase helps a lot. So I like this highlight here, by the way. They deliver 50% of items in 24 hours, 8% of items in 48 hours or less. So you can get like a lot of 1 day or 2 day shipping. And I also want to add the logistics of Latin America is much more complicated than the United States. So this is not nearly as easy, right? Because it's like you have the Andean mountains are absolutely massive. Mexico is a very mountainous region. Brazil is a very complex geographical region as well. So it's not like the United States, honestly, where like besides the Rocky Mountains, the rest of the country is actually relatively flat, east and west. So being able to build up and successfully run a logistics network is extremely hard, and doing it well is extremely hard. So that is a massive, massive moat. The only company in the world that I genuinely think can compete with them is Amazon, which we'll discuss a little bit later. This is something I found about the growth in these e-commerce markets for the next 5 years. I think these numbers are fair and reasonable. And a lot of this goes back to their financial offerings, right? It's like you don't have the financial infrastructure the United States has. And it's more complicated because you're operating between different countries. So that's one of the reasons why, in part, you haven't seen the same level of growth, in my opinion. There's a lot of other reasons, but the United States is one financial network. We're one country. But if you want to, you're operating in all these countries, it's a separate bank, a separate financial network, separate logistics. So it's hard to set these things up. So as like things like credit and debit and online payments and like internet penetration and phone usage is increasing, all of these things are going to go up because they're just more accessible. It's really that simple. And of course, on a marketplace like Mercado Libre, you're going to get much better pricing than you will at a local store. And we see that with Amazon today, where you get quality, pricing, and speed. It's just everything we all love. I just added this here because I think it's important to know, and I kind of mentioned this. When you start getting to scale, all you have to do is like increase the amount of items a customer buys a year by like 50%. And if you have a 50% increase, right, like let's say they normally buy 6 items, and then you have, like 10% increase, and they buy another half of an item, right? Well, your revenue goes up 10%. So if you have, in Mercado Libre, they got $16 billion a year in revenue in commerce, your revenue will literally increase by $1.6 billion. So it's like when you start drilling deep, cross-selling, and increase the quality of ads, so getting people to see products they actually want to buy through machine learning and AI. And then you also have their own primes called Melly Plus, where you get like benefits. You can, you get like streaming, and you get free shipping, and you get better credit offerings. All these things is just this coherent ecosystem that all yields growth. So a lot of these things, it's like when I look at this business, it's like I understand the business. It's not hard. And when I see how they grow it, it's not hard either. It's like they don't even need to sell more items either necessarily as well, right? It's like they have a logistics system so they can reduce margins, right? Or they have a payment system so they can increase margin. There's so many different ways they can do that. So in general, the commerce business is very, very powerful. That's most of their money. They also have a fintech business, and it's called Mercado Pago. And what I love about this business is you can see the monthly active users are 38% year over year, from 35 million to 49 million. 49 million is not even 10% of the population of Latin America, which is about 660 million people, right? And Brazil, I think, is like 180 million. I think Mexico is at 100 million. I think Argentina, I have no idea, probably 100 million or something as well. So basically, there's a lot of runway for them to grow by just getting more users. They do manage money, and they do have a credit portfolio. So the credit portfolio is very simple. A lot of people get access to credit cards. There's very low credit card penetration in Latin America, as I mentioned before. And then a lot of people are not financially educated in Latin America. So literally they'll just be like, hey, if you give us our money, right, we'll just put it in just bonds for you, and you'll get like 10% or whatever, the local denomination government bonds issue for. So it's a very easy way to get assets under management. You take that money and then you lend it out in a credit card portfolio. And then the way you do this responsibly is you have all these users on your platform. So like what a seller, for example, is making every month. So you can issue a seller a line of credit or a credit card based on their monthly revenues, right? So you can actually do this in a responsible manner. And they do have credit loss provision. So it's not like when they issue a credit card, they don't they're not financially prepared to take these losses. This is also a business that's doing, over $1 billion in free cash flow, guys. So, they can afford to take these losses. If they mess up. A lot of companies are not financially rich enough in the Latin American market that they can just lose money if they mess up. So it gives them a lot of freedom in terms of experimenting. So just mentioned this here, but very underserved market in terms of fintech, a great opportunity. And there's not a lot of VC in this area. So a lot of people just don't even have the money or the resources or the human resources, like in terms of tech talent, to even pursue these things. So that's one of the reasons why they just completely just destroy this market, is because they don't have like great competition. They don't have got competition because they have money and others don't. And I want to be clear, they're a very well-run company. I'm not like they're rich and everyone else is poor, but in the United States, we don't have any shortage of money, so you don't have shortage of competition. I think this is really fascinating. For 60% of users taking a loan, it's the first time they've had access to credit. That is insane. And of course, like as I mentioned, like if you're a seller generating revenue on a platform, you know how much money they're making. And if you have a buyer who's buying that platform, you know how much expendable income they have. So they can basically use machine learning on their proprietary data they have from usage of their platform to issue these loans in mass, or credit cards in mass. And then you can basically increase or decrease, like the requirements for someone to get a loan. So I mentioned it here. This is a fat stack of past due, 1.3 billion. They do have credit provisions for this, and yes, they will recoup some of this. I don't know how much. I couldn't find, but basically what I'm saying here is there is some risk. 1.3 billion is a lot of money to have on loan that you have not been paid back. These are NPL rates, 1 to 14. Usually with NPL, you have it two separate categories, 1 to 90 and 90 plus. Because once you get into 90 plus, you're usually not getting that money back. Most stuff gets paid by the time you get to that 90 day. And that's kind of why you see a decreasing in these loan amounts in the millions, is people do start paying back eventually. And I say it here, 9.3% all loans are up from 7.8% year prior. So they kind of do have more non-performing loans, I've noticed. This is something, again, like I said, they make enough money where they can afford it if they're kind of messing this up. The other thing about like macroeconomic when it comes to credit cards is, guys, you can tighten and loosen credit very quickly. So this is not a house loan, which is a 10, 20, 30 year maturation rate, where if you have a ton of these on your books, you're screwed, right? If you start seeing a decline economy, like you can shut down credit quickly. And if you have enough loss provision, you can manage bad economic times. The TPV transaction, like your total payment volume, right? So payment volume matters because they take a percentage of that volume. So one of the things they offer, and I really like this, is they offer online and offline payments, right? So you can read it right here, but basically you can use QR codes, they can mobile point of service, link website checkout integrations within their email. So if you're trying to build an online business, you can integrate basically with Mercado Pago, and then they will take a percentage, like 1, 2, or 3%, basically like whatever the total payment volume is. So that's why these numbers more or less matter. And you can see year over year, this is up like 30%. Of course, it's going to peak in Q4, usually around the holidays. Usually Q1 is your lowest. So this should go up as the year goes on, typically, in my opinion, and it probably will. It's interesting to see this total payment volume acquisition in these countries. So they actually have quite a bit in Argentina. This is actually where they are founded. It's definitely a little bit more competitive within these markets. It's even hard to read this. They are saying like year over year growth, but you can see it's like slowly but surely increasing here. Nothing crazy. This is interesting. The monthly active sellers of credit has doubled year over year. And this makes sense because if you're selling, again, they can see your revenue. So there's a lot of interesting things they can do here just with like information they have basically based on people using their platform. They offer remunerated accounts, which are pretty interest paying account, which is basically like, hey, I have money, you put in this account, we'll get you interest, and they're just investing in government bonds here. Insurance. This is very interesting. They offer life, car, and personal accidents insurance. Most people don't have access to insurance, man. And again, it's like when you have these financial profiles at users, you can actually issue these appropriately. So I did find it's 85 billion market in LatAm. The market cap of this company is 85 billion. So I don't know if they'll get full market share here, but it's like, could they make, another 10, 20, 30, 40 billion, 20 years down the line? Definitely a possibility. I should have put a number at what rate this is growing, but I'm pretty sure it's growing like pretty significantly, like 30 or 40% year over year. Let's see if we can find it actually. Okay. We can't find it. Whatever. So how does their money work? Okay. Every single country needs to have a separate bank account because they're all set to have separate financial systems. So what they do is they will hold currency in the local denomination of that country. So if they're Mexican, they have Mexican pesos. Argentine, they have Argentine pesos, etc. And what they do at the end of every month is they basically swap that money out into USD. Now, anytime you're exchanging money in mass, you will lose money. So the big markets really are Mexico, Brazil, and of course Argentina. Argentina, and I literally have a whole explanation of how they swap money in Argentina. Argentina is a very complicated country. And the long story short is they cannot use a normal exchange like it's the center of exchange. So they basically use this thing called the MEP rate. So they buy securities that are listed in Argentine pesos and US pesos. They buy in Argentine pesos and they resell it into US dollars, and that's how they get US dollars. It does have a 20% spread, which basically means they lose not 20% quite, but they do lose like about 20% of their money by swapping to USD and Argentina. They have switched over to basically only. I'm a little bit confused if like everything is bought and sold in USD or if they are constantly swapping USD or what. But Argentina saw like 300% year-over-year inflation. So just an FYI, like also like one of the main concerns. It's kind of what's going on in Argentina right now. Amazon. So Amazon's definitely a competitor. I don't really go too deep into Amazon, honestly, in this article. I probably should go on a little bit deeper, but Amazon operate really in Mexico, Brazil. Those are the main areas of operations. I don't think they're in Argentina. And while they technically ship to all of Latin America, they do not support as robustly as a company like Mercado Libre does. And to be honest, it's just not worth their time, guys. Like, even like Peru and Chile, for example, and Colombia are like regionally sized markets. They're literally like a drop in the bucket for a company like Amazon. And you can see this here. Their net sales for North America, we're missing like quarters here, but it was 105 billion with a B last quarter. So, the total like GDP of a country, like Chile, it might not even be $105 billion. So they don't have a lot of motivation to go in this country. Mexico and Brazil are big enough markets that they care. So for me, it's like, what's the main advantage like Super Mercado Libre has? And it's like, well, first of all, it's their backyard. It's their home turf, right? So they actually operate out of Uruguay right now. Uruguay borders Brazil. So if things aren't going well in Brazil, their CEO can take a quick plane trip and figure out what's going on. But do you think Andy Jassy gets in a plane and goes down to Brazil if he needs to? I mean, if it's pretty bad, sure, but it's like, first and foremost, it's not their primary market is number one. Number two, they don't offer the same comprehensive experience that is being offered by Super Mercado Libre. They don't have Mercado Pay with the logistics, the credit, the debit, the interest-bearing accounts. You get all of that with Mercado Libre. So as a seller, to have all your whole ecosystem in one market is definitely, I think, a little encouraging. It's really just it, honestly. It's like those two big things. And the last thing I guess we'll say is you cannot copy and paste a business into another country, guys. You need to adapt it to that country because there's different things going on. So like example of an adaptation is, and I'm sure Amazon does this as well now, but if you go through their balance sheet, Melly's balance sheet, they basically have an area for hedges they have bought. So they buy hedges against exchange rates on currencies. So if there's higher inflation, for example, in Argentina, they don't see a significant loss in their finances. So yeah, basically the risk here, but Latin America does not have the same kind of economy as the United States. You can go deeper on that. Their governments are not as stable as well. And yeah, I mentioned margins are down a little bit. Also, I have a little bit concerned about their loans and their credit due. So that's kind of the last thing I'll say. In general, though, very high growth company. I do think 20% year-over-year growth is very plausible. It's like they have commerce and fintech are growing both really rapidly, and the fact that they are kind of bundled together makes me think they're going to go extremely rapidly. So yeah, at the end here, I do have these kind of numbers summarized. So let's expand this really quickly for us to take a quick look at. So we can actually see the breakdown by countries, and you'll see this right here. So this is the total: 2.5 billion for Brazil, 650 million for Argentina, and 971 million for Mexico, and then 176 million for every other country. So you can see the importance of these three markets. There's nothing more important, really, right now. Brazil and Mexico. Brazil number one, Mexico number two in terms of importance, and Argentina should be number three. If the Argentines kind of turn around their economy, then yes, they should regain priority, but it's these two they should really be focusing on their bread and butter, especially Mexico, man. Mexico's right next to the United States. It's definitely more stable. They don't really have, it's not like amazing economy, but it's much stronger economy and more certain, in my opinion, than a lot of other Latin percent, largely in part because of proximity to the United States. You can actually see here, you can see the growth is really interesting. It's 56%, almost 57% for Brazil year over year, 6% Mexico year over year, and then they're down 21% year over year in Argentina, largely in part due to the macroeconomic stuff going on there, but only up 17.3% in the remaining countries. So I guess what we're really trying to emphasize here is like the importance of Brazil and Mexico is really, really big here. So yeah, that's everything on Super Mercado Libre. I'll link this in the YouTube video as well. I guess actually we should just go look at their numbers. I think this does a little bit better job. So we'll look at their financials. Thank God their financials are in USD. This is all USD. So you can actually see it here. If we put this as a percentage, guys, it's like on a bad year, we got 17% here. This is a bad year in 2015. And every year after that is like 30, 40, I guess 18 is bad, 60, 70, 70, 49. And I actually went through this. Their average growth rate in revenue is 40% year over year for 20 years straight. It's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my life in terms of growth. I really like I don't really care about net income growth because it's a little bit, it can be a bit deceiving because, you can have investments and stuff going on. But you can see they had $1 billion in net income in 2013. So, you start looking at comparables, guys, and like a lot of US tech companies of this size, right? This is a market cap of 85 billion. It's like that is the market cap of Uber, right? Sorry, I lied. It's 147 billion, and it's crazy because if we go look at the cash flow for Uber and that income, it's like they're 1 billion more, right? But they've just posted loss after loss after loss after loss. So Melly's been a profitable company for like 20 years now, on and off, obviously, just kind of depending. But in general, like they've been very profitable. You can see it like for quite a while now. Like a couple negative years here, but how far back do we have to go? Like they've been profitable since 2005 almost, and it's because they had to, right? You can't just not run your company profitably in the Latin American market or you're screwed. Normal balance sheet, nothing crazy. And then let's go with our cash flow. Cash flow is a really useful metric. So 4.6 billion in free cash flow. That is a fatty of a cash flow. And you have to understand when you're getting cash flow numbers like this, okay, you're in Latin America. It is not a cash rich environment. So you are like the big dog on the block. Okay, so you can afford to make mistakes. You can afford to invest in businesses and opportunities that other people can't afford. And it's like a lot of VCs are American VCs, United States VCs. So they're going to be a lot more cagey about putting dollar after dollar into Latin America, even if the opportunity is like obvious. So I just think that's kind of an interesting thing about the opportunity here. Instead, they'll plow their money into, Robinhood or whatever, SoFi, even though they struggle to make profits. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. I definitely think for me personally, this is a buy at their current growth if they can maintain it. I do think like anyone who bought around, basically anything here or here, man, we're way ahead of the curve here. So yeah, will be interesting to see how they do this year. But I honestly think even with their PE and everything, I think this their growth is enough. So yeah, hope you all enjoy.